with just telling everybody thank you for tuning in. I'm Jeff DeRose. I'm the Business Development Manager at the CSI Tech Incubator. The incubator is focused on finding ways to bring value to entrepreneurs during this time. We know how tough it could be, so our thinking is just really trying to facilitate conversations that can help bring you guys value, that can help you guys pivot, and maybe even make some good connections, through these fireside chats. So today we have Kurt. Kurt is the founding partner of c-f2, or should I say co-founder squared?
It's c-f square, so and c-f square stands for co-founder fund, but c-f square is the right pronunciation. Yeah.
Okay, c-f squared. Yeah. So Kurt is the founding partner of c-f squared, and they are an early stage tech investor. And we're here to talk today about going from ideas to scalable solutions, all that goes in between, and also, what should founders be doing to raise in this environment. So with that being said, I maybe want to let you take a second to introduce yourself, Kurt, and maybe just talk a bit about yourself and the firm.
Sure. Yeah, Kurt Vandebroek, originally Belgian, moved about 16 years ago to New York. There's also a bit of my entrepreneurial story in there, so I'll give a bit of a background. So I grew up in Belgium, went to university there, and then started working for a Belgian bank. I always say it's the largest unknown bank in the world. It's the largest bank in Belgium and Eastern Europe, KBC Bank. Basically, I had the luck to be in a position there where I became a specialist, a domain specialist in electronic banking for multinationals. It was like a real subsection of what the bank was doing. Not too many people in the world knew about it, and certainly not in Belgium. But that led to me to get some ideas what was needed in the market, and I started my first own company based on that knowledge that I built up in the bank. And in 2002, I met some people. We started a company which was Trax Finance. It was very successful, and in 2006 we sold that company to SunGard Data Systems. A US-based multinational, and as part of that acquisition, I then also transferred from Belgium in 2004. Actually, I already moved for doing business development for that company to the US. And then when we got acquired by SunGard, we had an earnout structure. So I stayed engaged with SunGard for multiple years, and always based out of New York. And from that experience, I then started to work as an angel investor in early stage tech companies, and structured then later as a fund that was February last year to take also money from external investors to increase my capabilities and increase the team size to invest.
Okay, cool. It sounds interesting. It sounds like you come from a very strong finance and entrepreneurial background, and you're kind of like rolling up all that experience into what you're doing now as a VC. And could you maybe speak to how has your entrepreneurial journey helped you as a VC? Sometimes you see VCs are people like you who started out as entrepreneurs first, and then there's some people who are in the VC space who are just pure finance guys, never started a company, but make all these about what they should be doing. I'm curious.
Yeah,
How has
well,
it helped you?
yeah. Certainly, my experience has colored the way that I have approached investing. Like I said, I started as a bank, but not a traditional investment banker either. So you see a lot of VC people that come from a more traditional investment banking background. I came from a more specialized banking role, and then use that, like I said, to start a company, not knowing how to get from an idea that I had to a scalable company. So those early days, finding those first early adopters, building a product, pivoting to find something that really matches the need in the market, and then scaling that to at the point where we sold it, we had 60 people on payroll and about 6 million in revenue. That was a very intense journey. And then afterwards with SunGard, I came in an organization that was, SunGard at that time was 5 billion revenue, of which 4 billion I think was in fintech, and 1 billion of that was in education, edtech. But SunGard data system, although it was a large multinational, it had acquired 200 companies in the 10 years before. So it was more a marketplace of all startups coming together and selling under one umbrella. And there again, I had multiple occasions to get internal ideas that grew internally and bring those to market. So again, that whole startup experience, but then within a larger organization, and doing that 4 or 5 times got me to the realization that, you know, there is a pattern to this. It's not just pure luck on having pure luck on your side to get an idea to a scalable solution. So if you approach it in a methodical way, you'll get there. And that's also when I decided, well, let's not stay with SunGard, because if I keep doing this over and over again, I just get a salary. There's no reason to do that. So, or
Yeah.
I don't profit from, I don't benefit from growing and creating value. So that's when I decided to quit SunGard and make that my job. And so that's also why I really focus on that phase from idea up to where you are ready to take either an A round or that you can grow on your own strength. And in that way, it's also a bit different from other VCs that are looking only to invest in companies that will take A, B, C, D round and then get to an exit. If you're stepping in really early on, you already create so much return. After that, you create something that is also profitable, even if it's only 2 million in revenue, but it's well profitable. That can also be a great way to create a company, and that's not many times that's not what VCs talk about. So and it's maybe something that I would can shed some light on because of my experience.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And you know, I think you're a little bit unique in that you are really an early stage VC who's really willing to seriously take someone's idea and invest in that. And even I believe you stated before, I mean, between our conversations, you said that you'd even invest in somebody without entrepreneurial experience. So maybe could you talk to us about like what do you look for in a founder when you're just investing in them, just strictly at the idea stage,
Yeah.
especially if you're a non-experienced entrepreneur?
Yeah. Yeah, so first of all, I look at domain expertise. I believe that if you have more domain expertise than anyone else, and that expertise puts you in a position that you can define a product um, that is different than what the market has, or a business model that is different than is currently available, that sets you apart. The hardest part I found when I had my idea was finding co-founders, because they always say to you, you need co-founders, and we don't invest in you if you don't have a co-founder. But how do you find a co-founder? It's like, the advice many people have is don't work with your friends. But if you already eliminate all your friends and your family, is who are you left with to become a co-founder? So yes, you can go. There are online places where you can look and where you can meet and where you can try, but it's hard. And so the whole concept around CF Square is co-founder fund. So we invest, but we're also co-founders, and our team, which is made of people with deep expertise in domain, CTOs, lawyers, that work with me, as we come in early, and we create that framework around the people with the ideas to get them from that idea stage to a proof of concept, where you do that implementation, where we tune the product market fit, and then start working on the scalability of the sales, the operations, the implementation, the operations, so that you are ready as an entrepreneur then to go for your A round, or already be profitable, um, and build a team around you that you can trust. Because once you're at that stage, you know much better what your capabilities are and where you have shortcomings, and then you can actually look for people that compensate for that. You don't know if you just have an idea and you want to start building a company. You don't know where your shortcomings are. You don't know what expertise you lack, because you've never done it. So and that's the whole concept of co-founder fund.
Okay, cool. There was a question from the group in the group chat, and I also just want to say, if anyone has a question, you can feel free to raise your hand on this Zoom call, or you could just write your question in the group chat, and we'll get to it eventually. So Reed asked, because you're not doing follow-on rounds and risking the dilution, does this mean you're looking for companies that can grow organically?
No, so I do. So I do follow. We do follow on in the A round. So pre-seed, seed, and A round. But then we played out. So no, it's both. And the way that we're structuring it pretty particularly is that the work that we invest, it's not a cash out, but we work that builds up debt in the company, and that converts at the moment of the next round. So we always have a real incentive to create value at any point of time together with the entrepreneur. So we really align whether they become profitable or whether they go for an A round, that our interests are aligned. So
Okay. Um, I think that answers the question. Anthony also commented that co-founders are tough to find. I think we all could agree with that one. And what did I want to ask you again? Yes, I wanted to ask you. So I think you have a unique approach to how you collaborate with founders. I remember in our conversations, you mentioned you even go to the point of sometimes where you're hiring consultants and this, that, and the third to help people build their businesses. So, you really get in there to do the dirty work alongside the founders. How has this unique approach, helped you? Do you find it making it, do you find your approach and really getting in there with the companies, helping to create more success, or maybe lowering risk for your investment? Curious about, like, how is your approach impacting your outcomes?
um, um, I had one bad outcome, and I was involved in it myself, and I learned a lot of that. But I had more positive outcomes. Um, Important is that the founder themselves and the founding team, that they keep steering and that they keep ownership. That's because what you don't want is to substitute yourself, and I made that mistake once. I invested, but that was before that CF Square existed. So I invested as an angel investor, actually with a group of angel investors, 5 angel investors. We came to a point where the 2 founders were not in the capability anymore to grow it. So and it was either defaulting the company or stepping in. So we stepped in, and I took on an operational role in there, but replacing the founders, and that was not a great idea. Ultimately, the company was sold and all that, but the problem was that I locked myself in for 3 years, and that's not the idea. So really important is that the founders are the ones that stay and steer, and that you find the fine line and where you can mentor them, where you can do the dirty work, and but then in the meantime, building a team around those people that makes them scalable.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. And I really like your approach. Ilya had a question. Would you invest alone or do you always invest with others?
I invest alone as well, and with others. But it's harder at the idea stage or the very early stage to work with others, because uh, at that stage, if you have too many ideas or too many people engaged, it limits your flexibility, and it immediately creates so much complexity. Some places where uh, I have multiple examples, but uh, it's sometimes it's a good idea to take friends and family around. Sometimes it's a bad idea, because if your friends and family um, have no idea what you're doing, and they're expecting to become billionaires in a few years' time, it probably will end up badly. So if they invest with the idea that that's a gift and a donation, then it's fine,
Mm.
because probably that is. That's the case, but so that's harder. If you have institutionals, I find institutionals push too hard early on, or a lot of the institutional push too much early on, and then the focus is too much on sales rather than on scalability of your operations, and then um, uh, that's a problematic. Uh, yes, it's finding that right balance.
Okay. Yeah, that was a great answer. And I don't think people realize how complicated it could get to be when you're, pooling your money with others and you have your demands, other people have their other demands, et cetera. So it can be a headache. But just to let's get into the main topic of the night. How does someone go from an idea to a scalable business? And maybe we should start with, how would you define a scalable business? I think that's just so vague, right?
I find that the hardest question as well, because um, um, eh, and I think you have to define it for the stage that you're at, and so um, I think it's about the theory of constraints. If you look at your business, there's always there's always one bottleneck that holds you back, and if you solve that bottleneck, then you become a bit more scalable. And then the next bottleneck is what holds back your scalability. So the theory is there's always one bottleneck that constrains your growth, and that's where you have to put your effort to. So if you're asking what's a scalable business, well, there can always be more scale to it. But what I define as scalable is that that you have a team in place um, that can take it um, for the next 3 years, on a journey for the next 3 years, and that you have your key management team in place, and that you have your funding, and that you have your base product that can take you to the next step. For me, that's what I define as scalability. And most of the time, that's around when you do your A round, or if you find profitability early on, you're obviously scalable as well. One of my earliest investments was a Belgian business in the education space, and after two seed rounds, they found profitability. And yeah, well, we could have pushed to go abroad and go to multiple countries and take additional funding, but the founders decided, look, we're not going to do that at this stage, and it was fine as well. But they're obviously scalable because they're running their business. They're growing 30% every year, year on year. That's not enough for a Series A investor, but it's beautiful business. Certainly, if you can pay a yearly dividend, that is as much as the initial investment in the company. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I think that's a good definition. And I guess for myself, I've always looked at a scalable business as a business that can serve a large group of people without having to add more manpower or making more investments in like property or equipment, right? Like maybe an example is you could be a hotel chain or you could build a platform like Airbnb. Both
Hmm.
help people find a place to stay, but just um, like Airbnb could go on and take on 100,000 new customers and not have to buy a single property. A hotel chain will have to get a whole new building, new staff, etc. So I guess that's the way I've always looked at a scalable business. Like, how much can you, or how many people can you serve without having to maybe make large expenditures or large effort into serving this larger base. I don't know. Maybe
Yeah,
I'm making it more confused.
no, I can give a quick example in the fintech space. So I was engaged with a company, and they had a great product, and it was easy to sell because the market needed it. But every time you had to do an implementation, they had to find a business analyst that knew that space really well, and they had to have a Amazon footprint that cost a few 10,000 a month, and the companies were not willing to pay that. Well, that's not that's not a scalable business, because first there's too much implementation cost, and your margins there are minimal or negative. So that's not scalable, and your infrastructure footprint is too large. So you still have to find a way to get over that. So it's great that you found scalability in your sales process, but if you don't have scalability in your deployment and in your operations, then that's where your focus should be before that you take your next step. Because if you keep pushing on that one, it's easy to sell that product, so you will keep on selling and you will be very happy on the revenue side, but you push yourself to that on the implementation and on the operation side. So you first have to solve that before that you get to your next step of growth.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. And with that being said, what do you think founders should be thinking about when it comes to scaling their business, scaling their operation, scaling their team? Like, let's maybe say like, you're an entrepreneur on day one with your idea. I personally think if you really want a good scalable business, it really comes in the work of the planning. You have to kind of plan and set yourself up for that, not just hopefully walk into a scalable business.
Well, if you walk into one, praise yourself lucky, you know. um, but luck doesn't happen that often. So yes, planning for it is certainly wise.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. So, are there any common roadblocks you see that founders are constantly facing when trying to scale?
Yeah, their mirror themselves, thinking that they can do much more than they can actually do, and that they have to that they that's part of scalability, is finding a way to let go some of it yourself. And because if you become the roadblock as a founder, you can only get so far, and it's a
Mhm.
very common recurring issue.
Yeah. And on the flip side of that, are there any proven methods to scaling? And I think what you were saying earlier about like scaling an operation, are there any methods to successfully scaling that you're seeing people doing?
Yeah, so the restrained approach, that's a theoretical concept there. So I use that a lot, because if you have more a framework that you can always fall back on, that's great. So I like that. And if you look where your constraints are, and you can bring in you can look not the next one, but the two next ones, and knowing how you're going to solve those and what kind of investment you need for that, that solves a lot. And those do, um, like a constraint is not always obvious, but there's always one, and that can be people, that can be operations, that can be infrastructure, that can be technology, that can be legal, that can be funding. It's not always as obvious, and having people around you that are in that mindset really helps. And people that, like I say, if you have mentors, if you work with um, uh, with an accelerator, and or you're sitting somewhere in a mentorship program, having someone that can help you think about constraints and what your next bottlenecks will be, and how you're going to solve that, and really pinpointing which ones they are, because sometimes they're hidden, or they show themselves in different, in not that easy um, to interpret way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. And what would you say maybe are some uh, common challenges for growing teams that you see?
I still think finding talent, or talent that matches what you need, is always difficult. Um, and keeping a strong culture. I've seen companies that have a really strong culture get much further, because then you'll at least overcome any roadblocks. Um, building that culture early on is really critical. Whatever that culture is, can be different things. You have to define that yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe we could talk about maybe put yourself. I mean, you've already been in the situation. Like, when you were an early stage founder, I think, what is it like mentally, emotionally when you're going from small team of two or three, serving a couple customers, having success, and then now it's like, okay, we need to really scale up, and you need that 30-man team, you need this huge investment, you don't have time for yourself anymore. Like, what is the emotional and mental toll like, and how should entrepreneurs adjust to that?
I'm going to tell you a really strange story, but my hobby is ultra running. And so I run distances longer than a marathon. And people always ask me, Kurt, why are you doing that? It's crazy. What joy do you have of running 100 kilometers straight, in the mountains, on a rainy, hailing day? Well, and I always say, because it's the same experience with a startup, but you can do it in one day. You get to the start, and you're all excited. We're gonna do this. It's gonna be fun. And the first half, most of the time, goes easy because you trained for that. You get your first 20K in, and it's going easy. You're enjoying the nice scenery, and then things start to hit you. It's your stomach is hurting you, or you rolled your ankle, and you think, like, should I continue, should I not continue? And you push through, and you overcome the issues. And it's not a straight decline either. So you have your highs, you have your lows, and the further you go, like, they start, like, you have really highs and really lows, and then
Hmm.
there is the finish. And then you make the finish, you sold your company, and you're so happy. you know and so it takes about 5 to 10 years for entrepreneurs to go through that experience. And that's why, if you do it in ultra running, you get it in one day, all those high and low. So it's a bit the same. So it's, you have to know who yourself. You have to know yourself. You have to know when to stop, and pivot, or when you have to slow down, or when you push harder, and but stay in tune with yourself. It's so critical, as a leader, as an entrepreneur, as an example for your community. It's really important.
Yeah, do you find all right, so like when you're first starting out, obviously you're going through the struggle phase of like not having much money or this, that, and the third. Do you find that after maybe like, you maybe get your first round, maybe a Series A, you can afford to pay yourself a salary? Do you maybe find the mental and emotional toll of scaling to be a bit easier when people find a little bit of um, at least comfortability in their finances? Or maybe even if you have comfortability in your personal finances, you're still a startup and you're never comfortable financially.
I always found the first part the most fun part. If you don't enjoy the first part, you will, yeah, it won't get better, because you get only more responsibilities, only more people challenging you, and the financial pressure is one. It's one that you have to live with. But if you plan that properly, and you get your funding, and you match your burn with your run rate, it shouldn't give you that much stress. So yeah, it's part of the journey, and if you don't like it, just be an employee. You can make a lot of money as an employee, and you can probably realize more of your dreams and more of your products. The first thing when I always say is just don't be an entrepreneur. It's we all put them on a stand, but great employees, great managers make much more contribute much more to the economy than entrepreneurs. So we need many more of those. So think 3-4 times before that you do it.
Yeah,
Um,
I agree with that. I tell people the same. I try to scare people away from entrepreneurship before even letting them get involved, because like you said, sometimes people just see the end goal. Oh my God, $10 million round. This guy's a billionaire in 4 years. And it's like, you have no idea what you're about to sign up for.
yeah, statistically, it's a much bigger gamble to be an entrepreneur. And you will always statistically make more money as an employee. So go for that.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. So we actually had a bunch of questions. Let me just ask some of these questions, and then we'll go into like the next topic. Let me just get this chat open. 1 second. So Reed said, seems like everyone is pursuing lean startup, while the only one pursuing anything differently is Peter Thiel's 0 to 1 approach. Granted, Peter has a bigger pocketbook than most, but it seems to me that if everyone is pursuing the same approach, that there has to be, say, 15% of the ideas, and perhaps particularly the big ideas with the biggest markets, that are being missed. Have you considered both lean startup and 0 to 1 and compared the two, and say it's a spectrum between the two? Where are you?
I read both books. I enjoyed them both. Um, um, my first startup, Trax, is now Trax Finance is the largest platform for multinationals to connect with their banks. About 40% of all the S&P 500 companies are using that platform. So I think with that startup we changed an entire world, the entire uh, community of multinationals, the way that they actually interact with banks. Now, do you know that name? Well, SunGard is big, and SunGard was then sold to FIS. And with FIS, it's now a one of the, I think it's a $40 billion company. So I don't think it's thinking small, but at the infancy of an idea, you don't know, and sometimes it turns out that you have created a great small company, and sometimes it's something that can scale to the billions. And yes, Peter Thiel's only gambles on that. Great. And then if that's the money you want, you have to you go for it. But I think you don't know until that you really have worked out your idea, how scalable it is, and not scalable it is.
Okay. Great answer. Great answer. Next question was from George. What was your greatest failure and your greatest victory? What did you learn from each?
My greatest
I'm assuming
victory.
referring to your greatest failure or victory as a VC.
Because I wanted to answer it was at one time 80 kilometers in that I still had 40 kilometers to go, and that I couldn't keep anything in my stomach. That's probably my and my biggest failure was that one penalty kick that I had to do in the finals of a soccer game that I missed. Those are the ones that are most on my mind. Business wise, yeah, you know, I don't know. It's hard to judge which one was the best. Every time that we do something right that works feels for me like a large victory. If we if we find a way to do professional development on a better way, and that just picks up and becomes great, a great scalable add-on, it feels like a victory every time that you find solutions for issues. And every time that I pushed my ideas and they didn't work out, and I didn't listen to the entrepreneur, and I thought I knew it better, and it fails, feels always like a big failure. So I don't dare to push my ideas too hard anymore.
Okay, that's good and that's fair. I'll come back to the rest of the question to the rest of the questions because I feel like they'll be answered through the next few questions I'm going to ask. Let's just get back into these questions. So now on to COVID-19. How has COVID-19 been for you and your portfolio companies, and how are you adjusting in this environment?
Yeah, so in the edtech space and in the fintech space, I had the luck to be in companies that all benefit, that all had a lot of benefit from COVID-19. So we saw tremendous growth for online learning solutions, parent communication, also in the lending space where we have an investment. There is a tremendous demand for the digitization of the lending, as uh, the 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 lending processes of the banks. And also demand for I've invested in one company that's on low code development. There is also a lot of demand there to reduce the cost of development. Yeah, probably lucky, to be to have a portfolio of companies that have been very little, yeah,
Yeah,
positively impacted actually.
yeah. That's interesting. That's interesting. And congrats to you for that. You know, you're well positioned. Are you still actively looking for deals in this environment, or?
Yeah, open store is open. Yeah.
That's good. That's good. A lot of people think that, at least startups founders think that in this environment, nobody's cutting checks and this, that, and the third. But I guess you would agree that companies who are bringing value can find money.
Um, yeah, that didn't change. No, value investment is what you do as 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 a VC. So you're looking for those opportunities. Uh, in our chat before it started, I already indicated what I find difficult though is that too many people are that it's hard not to pivot. To what I see as a temporary situation. But you can so stick to your guns, but it's hard to say how far to stick to your guns because the new normal, which everyone talks about now, will be kind of different than what we had before. So it's hard to judge how different it will be or how much we're gonna fall back on our the situation pre-COVID, and so that's a bit hard to judge, and that makes it harder to invest. But if the people that you work with are open-minded, they're quick to react, they're bold, and they're willing to take risks, calculated risks, and benefit from the situation, then that's still the same. Yeah, it's still an investment opportunity.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. And what would you say VCs are looking for in this environment? Would you say there's like any common areas that?
Don't take me as a regular VC. So I cannot answer what the typical Series A, Series B VC is looking at. What I've heard is that they're looking mainly at their own portfolio and see how that they can support their own portfolio. But on the early in the early stage side is like, yeah, think how things will be impacted, how big changes in the world will drive new business, and if you're at the forefront, if you really are a domain expert and you know what the impact is going to be, well, let's make it happen, you know.
Okay, that's good. That's good. And what do you think some startups should be doing to successfully raise capital? You know, I think it's tough to get out there and network now. It's tough to get out there. I think just do some of the groundwork when it comes to pitching VCs or getting in front of VCs. What do you think startups should be doing to successfully raise capital?
Focus on your business. Make sure that the fundamentals are right, and if they're not, make sure that you really understand why it's not. That you have a very strong story, because as an investor, if you want, if it's obvious that the entrepreneur understands their own business and what drives it, why they're having a hard time, and understand the drivers of it, it's you're close to, it's easier to convince, and it's easier to believe in an entrepreneur that really understands his or her business.
Hmm. Yeah, that's good. That's good. That makes a lot of sense, actually. So yeah, so I mean, I think this concludes the talk for tonight. I think we have a few more questions in here, but definitely want to tell you once again, thank you, Kurt, for taking the time to talk to us about pivoting in COVID and also how to go from idea to scalable business and just speaking to your experience there. Just some more
Thank,
questions.
thanks for the opportunity, and yeah, any other questions I can take, happy to take them.
Yeah, you know what I think we should do is let me ask you these last few questions and maybe I'll take everybody off of mute and let the group interact. So someone was saying, what are the main considerations you apply when investing in a business that primarily operates in another country, if you even do that?
Yeah, I invested in Belgian business, a Dutch business, a UK business, a US business. So, yes. Again, it comes back to the basics: is do they really know their market, and or are they domain experts? For me, it's always, and that's for me critical. Um, and do you know your market that well, that you can be a market leader? And I think it's in Peter Thiel's, someone brought it up here as well, as like, first become, if you can already be a market leader in a small market segment, that gives you a tremendous position for growth. And one of the companies that I work with is Ginzy. It's in the edtech space, but they have 65% of every school using their whiteboard solution. So basically, they have a monopoly in that space. It's a smaller market, the Dutch market, but that gives them such a strength in that space, and such a cash generation in that of that business, that they know are very hard growing in the US, and they learned how to scale their business in the Netherlands. And is it easy to redo? No, you have to adopt it to the market where you go, and you still have to be flexible. But it does give you at least a great foundation.
Okay, that makes sense. Someone asked, or someone stated, um, that maybe you're in startup as a service, but then they said, "Ha, I finished the Leadville 100," with my half joke being, "If you run the whole way, you win." I did about 60 miles of running and about 40 miles of walking. I guess that was just a statement to your.
Anyone, Leadville is one of the big ones. That person did more distance than I did. My longest was 125 kilometers, and Leadville is 100 miles. So 60 miles in is still 100K. So
I got
congratulations. I hope that person had a great time. Who is it?
that's
Maybe
Reed.
we can, sorry?
That's Reed. His name is Reed in the on the
Hey,
chat.
hey, Reed, congratulations, man. It's certainly want to talk with you about that.
Okay. Someone has another question. Do you have any advisement for individual investors to invest on small capital or large cap? Thanks. Um,
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
that's the same thing as my advice: become an entrepreneur, or an employee. Become an employee. Um, as an investor. I just don't like that business of investing in asset in yeah, large assets, large caps. Although my 401k is there as well, of course, but I really like the small caps, but just stay away from it if you cannot handle the risk.
That makes sense. That makes sense. So yeah, I'm gonna take everybody off of mute. And if you guys have any additional questions or feedback, just want to make a statement, feel free to jump in. I muted you all. So if anyone has any comments or questions or comment for me, feel free.
I have a question. So are you focused more on software or hardware?
Software, I don't understand hardware, so only software.
Gotcha, thank you.
Hey, great meeting you. Thank you for taking all this time and sharing the wisdom. The size of the typical investment? Share that.
Between 50 and 500,000.
Thank you.
You know, actually, a question for the room: are there any founders in here that's actively raising? Okay. Do you maybe want to talk about what your startup is, or what do you do?
Well, sure. Thank you for the invitation. My startup asks the question that if we can personalize learning for students, why are we ignoring the teachers? So it is a platform that personalizes professional learning for teachers at scale, applying to any kind of a learning framework or set of standards. It enhances individual skills awareness, clarifies who needs what kind of learning in the first place, and then uses the data to tether all relevant elements of the learning experience around every teacher. The company is called To Know Me. To Know Me is really the idea of helping people know themselves in order to make better decisions and live with the results and the consequences. The company is in the market, one of those, 3-4 years of digging dirt and figuring out how to become the domain expert, closing major transactions statewide and at the national level around major frameworks used to support teachers, and looking for some money to really scale in sales and in onboarding of the major clients. But otherwise, everything is a go. So
Right.
Yeah, that's excellent. If you don't mind, can you write your website in the chat, and I could check it out, take a look.
it's like we agreed about all this before the call, but thank you.
Sure. Anybody else in here is a founder? I would love to hear about anybody's companies. Yes, no, maybe so.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Hi, this is Reed. And Kurt, what's the best way to get to you? info@c-f2.com?
Yeah, that comes straight to, yeah, when you send an email there, it certainly comes to me.
Okay.
Thank you.
Perfect. Anybody else out there with a question, or maybe want to talk about their startup? You know, we have a VC on the line. You never know, this might be a lucky day.
Also, if you want to if you send me a LinkedIn invitation, mention that you know me, of that you were part of the CSI webinar, then I'll accept you, because I just get too many LinkedIn requests of people that just want to sell you something. So if you do that, I'll accept you, and then we can always communicate. I'm pretty good to answering any messages on LinkedIn as well.
Sounds good. Sounds good. So, I guess that's it for the night. I don't think anyone has any questions or want to shout out their startups. So just want to tell everybody once again, thank you all for coming out. I hope that this conversation with me and Kurt was useful and beneficial to you. And Kurt, once again, we really appreciate you taking out your time to share your knowledge, your experience, and just bringing some good energy to the incubator.
So thanks for the opportunity. It was a great chat, and good night, everyone.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Have
Thanks,
a good
Jeff.
night.
Take care. Good to see you. Bye-bye. Good night, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.